They say the real betrayal isn't the lie, it's the silence after it. My name is Jonathan Miller. I'm a 52-year-old structural engineer in Asheville, North Carolina, and on the night everything changed, I was standing in my kitchen, staring at a single sentence that unraveled 22 years of marriage. My wife, Dana, was supposed to be at a wellness retreat in Sedona, Arizona, but the email she sent at 10:48 p.m., her time was anything but healing. No greeting, no context, just 12 words. I moved the inheritance into my personal account. It's safer this way. Attached was a blurry photo of her and a man I didn't recognize. They were on a balcony at sunset, glasses of wine in hand. She looked relaxed, happy even. Happier than I'd seen her in years. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just my money she'd stolen. It was my sense of home. I set my phone down, walked to the kitchen sink, and poured myself a glass of water. The hydrangeas outside the window were in full bloom, flowers she had insisted we plant last spring. I remembered kneeling beside her, hands in the dirt, laughing about how bad we both were at gardening. Now the laughter echoed like a ghost. That inheritance, $612,000 from my Uncle Robert, wasn't just dollars and cents. It was the life savings of the man who raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, a man who built houses by hand and taught me the meaning of legacy. Before he passed, he wrote me a note that simply said, "Use this to build something that outlasts you." Dana had never cared much for Uncle Robert. She barely spoke at his funeral, didn't help with the estate, but 3 months ago, she'd suddenly become interested in financial planning. "Maybe we should combine accounts," she said over dinner, without looking me in the eye. I nodded then. I see clearly now. I slept alone that night, in the same bed where we once dreamed aloud about growing old together. But oddly, I slept better than I had in years. The betrayal wasn't complete yet, but the foundation had cracked, and I was done ignoring the sound of it breaking. How many cracks do we ignore before we admit the house is falling apart? For anyone who's ever held on too long, for love, for routine, for fear of starting over, how much silence is too much? And when someone finally shows you who they are, how many chances do they deserve? I met Dana 24 years ago at an urban design expo in Philadelphia. I had just wrapped up a project that transformed an abandoned textile mill into senior housing, something I was deeply proud of. She was giving a talk on holistic wellness and community health, captivating a room full of skeptics with grace and charm. I was one of them, until she looked right at me mid-sentence and said, "We can't build stronger communities without building stronger people." I remember thinking, this woman has a mission. We exchanged numbers. We had coffee the next morning. 6 months later, we were house hunting. By the time we married, she had launched her own brand, herbal products, yoga retreats, guided fasting. I supported her through every expansion, from hiring her first 2 employees to opening her studio in downtown Asheville. We bought a craftsman-style house on Chestnut Street, 2,400 square feet of original wood floors and wraparound porches. Dana wanted every room to have a purpose, a mood. I designed the renovation plans myself. She painted the walls in earthy tones and lit incense on the windowsills. It wasn't just a house, it was a shared canvas. We didn't have children. At first, it was because we were both too busy. Then came the conversations about choice, freedom, identity. "My work is my legacy," she'd say. And for a while, I believed that too. For over a decade, it worked. We were the couple people envied. We hosted dinner parties where contractors rubbed shoulders with herbalists. We hiked on Sundays and traveled for conferences together. Our life looked effortless from the outside, and sometimes it even felt that way. Then my uncle got sick. The cancer hit fast, stage 4 by the time it was diagnosed. I spent 4 months commuting between Asheville and Winston-Salem to care for him. Dana came once. Hospitals make me anxious, she said. I didn't argue. I just kept going. When Robert passed, he left everything to me. The money was more than expected. He'd been quietly investing for decades. I was stunned. Dana was interested. Her tone shifted when we talked about it. We should do something smart with that, she said. Maybe expand the wellness side. Add a retreat space in the mountains. I told her I needed time. She didn't push, not openly, but the signs began to show. Her research trips doubled in length. Her phone was always on silent, screen down. Passwords I used to know suddenly didn't work. She started locking her laptop. And then, 3 weeks before that email, the one that burned everything down, our neighbor Kayla mentioned she'd seen Dana being dropped off late at night. I figured you were out of town, she said casually. I was. Denver. 3-day conference. I didn't ask questions. Just smiled. Just added it to the list. There's something disorienting about watching a life unravel not through one grand betrayal, but through a slow erosion of trust. A joke that lands flat. A lie that hides behind routine. A kiss that's just slightly too far from the mouth. When Dana finally made her move, I wasn't surprised. But I was still gutted. She wasn't just taking the money. She was rewriting the narrative of our lives, as if it had all just been a clever partnership to get her where she wanted to go. And maybe, in her eyes, that's all it ever was. The day after Dana's email, I didn't call her. I didn't scream or spiral. I made coffee the way I always did, strong, black, with a hint of cinnamon. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching morning light spread across the hardwood floors I had sanded by hand. I wasn't in shock. I wasn't even angry. What I felt was sharper, colder, a clarity I hadn't known I needed. At 9 a.m., I called Emily Lawson, the estate attorney who had handled my uncle's trust. She'd been working with Robert since before I met Dana. She was smart, discreet, and relentless when she needed to be. I didn't lead with emotion, just facts. Dana sent an email last night, I said. She claims she moved the inheritance into her personal account. A pause, then, and did she succeed? Number, because I never told her where it was. I explained how I had moved the money months ago, right after I noticed her sudden interest in our finances. The trust was irrevocable and separate from marital assets, something Robert had insisted on, despite how close Dana and I had seemed at the time. He'd seen more than I had, maybe. Emily's voice was calm but firm. If she attempted access, that's attempted fraud, and you're protected. But we'll need to monitor every digital trail. I'll initiate protocol with the trust firm immediately. By noon, I'd heard from the fund managers. There had been 2 failed attempts to access the trust account, one 2 days ago, one just hours after Dana's email. Both flagged, both blocked. One came from a residential IP address in Arizona. I didn't need a detective to guess where she was. That afternoon, I met with Ben Crawford, a divorce attorney referred by Emily. He worked out of a small, efficient office near downtown, filled with framed quotes about justice and resilience. His handshake was firm, his demeanor surgical. She stole nothing legally, I explained, but she's been trying. I want this handled quietly, but I want it handled completely. Ben nodded. You have leverage. In North Carolina, inherited funds in a properly maintained trust aren't subject to division, especially if they were never commingled. But attempted fraud? That adds a layer. He asked for documentation. I gave him everything I had, screenshots, bank notices, Dana's email, even the blurry photo she'd attached of herself and the man on the balcony. Ben studied it for a moment. We'll file on grounds of financial misconduct, and if we need to push harder, the trust logs will help. Have you spoken to her since the email? No, I said. She texted. I didn't answer. You shouldn't. By 5 p.m., the initial divorce petition had been prepared. We weren't just ending a marriage, we were building a case. At 6:23 p.m., Dana called. I let it go to voicemail. She tried again at 6:28, then 6:34. At 6:41, she texted, "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened our shared cloud storage. We had used it for years to keep track of renovation ideas, invoices, family documents. It was her idea and she was smart about it. Too smart, maybe. She must have forgotten I still had access. I clicked into a folder labeled Wellness Compound Concept West. Inside, I found more than sketches. There were screenshots of my financial dashboards, scribbled calculations subtracting hypothetical legal fees from the total inheritance amount. There was even a photographed whiteboard with my name and a note, "Jonathan, old school, won't see it coming." I stared at the screen for a long time. That night, I slept in the guest room. I couldn't bear the master bedroom. Not because of the memories, but because I had no idea how long those memories had been false. Had she been pretending that whole time? Or was this who she became? The next morning, I walked our property in silence. The herb garden she once tended was overgrown. The bench under the magnolia tree where we used to read on weekends was covered in fallen leaves. I realized this wasn't our home anymore. It was mine now, and I needed to decide what to do with it. Emily called later that morning. The trust company traced another login attempt, this time from a Scottsdale IP address, same as the others. All failed, all logged. We now have enough to pursue this from a criminal standpoint, if you choose. I'm not there yet, I told her. But I want it documented. We'll proceed quietly. By lunchtime, Ben called. Dana had retained counsel, a firm known for aggressive tactics and sharp elbows. But they were operating with incomplete information. They didn't know she'd been blocked. They didn't know I was 10 steps ahead. The next move was mine, and I intended to make it count. Ben had a saying that stuck with me: don't light a fire unless you're ready to control the burn. I wasn't here to burn Dana down. I was here to contain the damage, draw a line, and walk away without smelling of smoke. That weekend, while Dana was still in Arizona, probably sipping herbal tea with her bearded companion, I stayed in Asheville and got to work. I reviewed every joint account, every shared investment, every property document. The more I dug, the more I realized how long she'd been laying the groundwork. Over the last 6 months, Dana had withdrawn over $160,000 from our joint savings and checking accounts, each transfer small enough to avoid triggering scrutiny. The funds were funneled into an account under her name only at a credit union I'd never even heard of, Mountain Valley Cooperative Bank. The mailing address on that account? A loft apartment in Scottsdale. She had built a second life while sleeping beside me. On Monday, I walked into Ben's office with a folder thick enough to slam. I had printed bank statements, email threads, copies of credit reports, and even screenshots of online listings for the Scottsdale property, fully furnished, short-term lease, with 2 registered tenants, Dana Miller and a Jason R. Berkeley. Ben raised an eyebrow. She signed a lease with this guy? Looks that way. You want to name him in the divorce? Number. He's not the point. She is. I was tired of seeing women in these stories become cautionary tales or punchlines. This wasn't about revenge. It was about self-respect, about showing the people who trusted me, including the man who left me that inheritance, that I could rise above theft with dignity. At 3:17 p.m., Dana's attorney, Linda B. Rollins, called Ben's office. Her tone was direct, even smug. My client believes your side is exaggerating events and intends to pursue mediation on her terms, she said. Ben put her on speaker. She's welcome to pursue whatever she likes, he replied coolly. We'll be filing our motion citing financial misconduct, bank fraud, and misrepresentation of marital assets within 48 hours. Let's not escalate this unnecessarily. We didn't, Ben said. Your client did. That night, Dana called again. I answered. I needed to hear her voice, not because I missed it, but because I wanted to be sure mine stayed calm. You blindsided me, Jonathan. You stole from me. I didn't steal anything. We're married. It's our money. Wrong, I said carefully. The trust was never commingled. It was in my name only. And your attempts to access it were blocked and recorded. Silence. Who told you that? The trust company. My lawyer. The people you thought I hadn't spoken to. She exhaled sharply. This is getting out of hand. It was out of hand the second you treated me like a stepping stone. Another pause. Then she softened. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I needed a fresh start. Jason helped me see that. My whole identity was tied up in you and Asheville and this idea of a life I didn't want anymore. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Then why not leave honestly? Because I didn't think you'd ever let go. There it was. The truth, naked and small. I ended the call with a simple, let your attorney do the talking from now on. The next morning, Ben filed the official petition in Buncombe County Court. We cited misappropriation of funds, concealed assets, and intent to commit fraud. Attached were 26 pages of exhibits, email records, account logs, access attempts, and a sworn statement from our neighbor Kayla, confirming she'd seen Jason dropping Dana off multiple times while I was away for work. By Friday, Rollins reached out again. We'd like to avoid a court hearing. Would your client consider mediation? Ben relayed the message. I thought for a moment. Only if she returns half of what she took from our joint accounts, signs a non-disclosure agreement, and walks away from any claim to the inheritance. That's firm? Stone set. That weekend, while the world spun on, I repotted the orchids in the sunroom. Dana had always said they were too delicate for her touch. Turns out they were just waiting for less noise, more care. Mediation was scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. Dana arrived 10 minutes late, wrapped in a linen shawl and carrying a stainless steel water bottle with lemon slices floating inside. Her lawyer, Linda Rollins, was all sharp heels and tighter smiles, projecting confidence like armor. I didn't say a word to either of them. I sat beside Ben, documents neatly stacked, eyes forward. I wasn't there to reconcile. I was there to witness the closing arguments of a life I no longer belonged to. The mediator, a retired judge named Evelyn Marsh, greeted us with gentle authority. She'd seen it all: anger, regret, manipulation, desperation. I could tell she recognized which side was which from the minute she walked in. We started with financials. Rollins spoke first. My client acknowledges that funds were transferred from the joint account, but maintains that they were used to support shared business ventures, travel required for product research, and general marital lifestyle. Ben didn't even glance up from his notes. There are $178,400 in transfers unaccounted for, and none of the businesses involved list my client as a partner or co-owner. Furthermore, several of the expenditures were deposited directly into a personal account registered solely under Ms. Dana Miller's name at Mountain Valley Cooperative Bank. The room stilled. Evelyn asked, Ms. Miller, do you dispute the ownership of this account? Dana folded her hands. Number. But I had plans that were going to benefit both of us. You made those plans without me, I said calmly, not needing to raise my voice. That's not partnership. That's theft with extra steps. Dana's gaze dropped to the table. Rollins tried to steer things. Let's speak realistically. Divorce is costly. Litigating this further will drain resources from both parties. My client is willing to walk away without seeking any part of the trust inheritance in exchange for retaining the funds already used. I leaned toward Ben and whispered, "Time to show our hand." He nodded and slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots from Dana's wellness compound folder on our cloud drive, which she had forgotten to lock down. There were notes about access codes, security questions, transfer protocols. She had even taken a picture of a whiteboard with calculations showing projected gains if I never contested the withdrawal. When Dana opened the folder, her expression broke for the first time. "You went through my files?" "They were our files," I corrected. "You just mislabeled them." Rollins flipped through the documents with a visible shift in posture. "Lawyers know when they're losing." Ben continued, "In light of this evidence, our offer is final. Ms. Miller will return $89,200, half of what was taken from joint marital accounts, within 72 hours. She will sign a non-disclosure agreement barring her from discussing this marriage or divorce in any public or private forum. In return, Mr. Miller will not pursue criminal charges related to attempted access of protected trust funds." Evelyn turned to Dana. "You may take a break to consider." Dana didn't move. Her fingers traced the edge of the folder, eyes distant, as if finally seeing the wreckage for what it was. "I'll sign," she said quietly. "I just want this over." 10 minutes later, the papers were signed. She didn't ask for a copy. She didn't ask for time. She didn't even say goodbye. As we stood to leave, I slid a small envelope across the table. "You left a few things in the house. These are the codes for the alarm in the garage. You can come by when I'm not there." Dana stared at the envelope like it was radioactive. "That's it?" "There's nothing left," I said. "And if there ever was, you ended it long before I did." She reached for the envelope, hesitated, and then took it. "It was never really about the money, Jonathan." "No," I said. "That's what makes it worse." She left the building without looking back. That night, I returned home, poured myself a glass of the bourbon Uncle Robert had gifted me on my 50th birthday, and stood in the doorway of my living room. The walls held memories, but they weren't mine anymore. They were projections, staged photos from a life that had collapsed from within. Tomorrow, I'd begin the process of selling the house. But tonight, I would allow myself one final toast to survival, to clarity, and to never mistaking silence for peace again. 3 weeks after the mediation, the house on Chestnut Street went up for sale. I didn't stick around for showings. I let the realtor handle everything. He said the wraparound porch and original heart pine floors would sell themselves, and they did, faster than I expected. A young couple with twin boys made an offer within 48 hours. I signed the papers, handed over the keys, and walked away without turning back. It wasn't that I didn't love the house. I had, deeply. But like any structure, once the foundation cracked, you had to ask yourself, was it safer to rebuild or relocate? I moved into a converted loft downtown, high ceilings, exposed brick, a view of the river, no guest room, no unnecessary space, just what I needed and nothing more. It was 3 blocks from my office. I started walking to work every day. No more morning traffic, no more coffee cups left half-finished as Dana packed for her next wellness trip. My mornings were my own again. The silence was different now, not hollow, but open. It gave me room to think. One afternoon, I met with Emily at her office. She had the final paperwork from the trust company in hand. "The logs captured everything," she said, flipping through pages. "Every failed login, every IP trace, even the export attempts from your home Wi-Fi." "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends. The legal department has flagged the case for potential prosecution, but they're leaving it to you. You can refer it to the authorities or close the file." I looked down at the stack of evidence. I could press charges. I'd win. The digital trail was airtight, but something in me had shifted. "I think I'm done," I said. "I don't need a courtroom to prove who I am." Emily nodded, no judgment in her expression. "Then we'll file it as resolved and retain everything on record." Before leaving, I asked her one last favor. "I want to restructure the trust, not for retirement or real estate, but something bigger, something that honors what Uncle Robert stood for." That same week, we began the paperwork to turn the remaining funds into a foundation. Its mission was simple: provide architecture scholarships for students who had lost one or both parents, kids who, like me, knew what it meant to rebuild from absence. We launched it quietly. No press, no gala, just a simple application form, a review board of professionals, and a commitment to fund one student each year. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl from rural western North Carolina. Her father had died in a construction accident. Her essay? Designing spaces that feel like forgiveness. When I read it, I felt something crack, but not in the way things used to break. This was a different kind of crack, one that let light in. I signed the scholarship letter that night, sealed it, and left the office feeling lighter than I had in months. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the envelope arrived. No return address, handwritten, postmarked from Arizona. I'd just come back from the post office downstairs in my building when I noticed it mixed in with the rest: utility bill, trade magazine, and then that. Inside was a check, made out to me, for exactly $89,200. Along with it, a short note, 2 lines, written in the same looping cursive Dana used to write grocery lists with, the rest of what I owed, not just the money. No signature, none needed. I stood there in the lobby for a long time, the paper growing warm in my hands. She didn't owe me an apology. She owed herself the truth. And maybe, just maybe, this was her first step toward owning it. I took the elevator back up to my loft, slipped the check into a folder marked Foundation Contributions, and texted Emily to confirm the deposit. "Another scholarship," I told her. "We'll call this one the second brick." That evening, I walked down to the riverfront. There was a bench Dana and I used to sit on back when things were still soft between us. We once dreamed of opening a wellness center right there, her services, my design. It was a good dream. It just didn't survive the weight of who we became. I didn't sit on that bench. Instead, I leaned against the railing and watched the barges drift by, lights flickering on the water. There was something about the current that felt familiar now, not rushed, not angry, just steady and forward. As the sky darkened, my phone buzzed. A text from Jerry, a longtime friend and fellow architect. "Dinner still on for 7?" Bringing that designer I mentioned. I glanced at the time. Just enough to walk home, change into something clean, and head to the restaurant. Just enough time to say yes to whatever came next. Jonathan's story is a powerful reminder that betrayal isn't always about sudden explosions. It can be the quiet withdrawal of love, trust, and respect over time. For older adults who have weathered life's storms, this story speaks to the importance of protecting what truly matters: dignity, legacy, and peace of mind. When trust is broken, it's tempting to retaliate, to burn everything down. But there's a deeper strength in choosing clarity over chaos and purpose over pain. Jonathan didn't seek revenge, he sought renewal. By turning inherited pain into scholarships for the next generation, he honored the past while investing in the future. The lesson? We are never too old to choose a wiser ending. We may not control how others treat us, but we always control how we respond. Whether you're navigating betrayal, grief, or the quiet disappointments of life, remember, strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply builds again, with fewer regrets and deeper roots.